one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everyone. In accordance with the requirements of the open meeting law, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and broadcast over the Lunenburg Public Access Channel. I would ask, is there any public comment from the board this evening?
Sure. I public commented last week about the storm resiliency program with Unitil and removing of the trees, and just based on an email that I read where somebody was advocating for the pruning of the trees and didn't want us to stop that, I just wanted to say that that's not what the storm resiliency program is, that it's not about standard pruning. Standard pruning occurs anyways, and that there's a process for that. But the storm resiliency program is more compared to a clear cutting of an area where they no longer worry about trimming limbs because they actually just remove the entire tree. So I just wanted for anybody who's following that topic to make sure that they understood that if we're advocating to keep the trees, it doesn't mean we're advocating to not still prune trees, that would still be under their jurisdiction to prune a tree in the normal way that they've been doing it. So that's all.
Okay.
Thank you.
And it's on our agenda, so you can bring, that'll come up again later on the meeting. Anybody else? Just one announcement. This is the only announcement?
Yeah, I have one announcement I'll make
Okay.
now.
So we are having the Board of Selectmen with in conjunction with the Eagle House and the Senior Center is having a volunteer appreciation reception on Thursday, September 19th from 6 o'clock to 8 p.m. at the Eagle House on 25 Memorial Drive. It is for all the committees and all the appointed committees and boards and commissions throughout the town, so that the Board of Selectmen can recognize them in their volunteerism. It's a good time for people in the public who are interested in volunteering to speak with people who are members of these different municipal bodies and ask them questions, and also just to a good chance to hear cross-committee, cross-board, any kind of information that people would know, just so you get to know everybody in other committees as well. So again, it is on Thursday, September 19th, 6 to 8 p.m. at the Eagle House. If people can RSVP to the Executive Assistant, Elaine Peterson, by 4 p.m. on September 12th, so we can plan the refreshments accordingly. You can email Elaine at epeterson@lunenburgonline.com or call 978-582-4144.
And it's elected and appointed boards, right?
Yes. Yes.
But we haven't had one for a few years, but the one that we did have was lovely.
Yeah, we've had two in the past, and I don't know why they were discontinued. Maybe it was just scheduling, but it's nice to have them back.
Yes, it is. Thank you for thinking of that.
Just a quick announcement from Casella. So they notified us this afternoon that the truck has broke down today. So a few streets weren't picked up. So people living on one side of Electric Ave, Hollis Road, Whalum Road, and all roads connecting, Richards Way Road, Tillman Ave, and White Street, and all roads connecting, they'll be picked up tomorrow, Wednesday, August 21st.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Any public comment from the public? Mr. Weaver.
Good evening, all. Steve Weaver, 288 Holman Street. I want to thank the board for the stand that they took about not removing the trees in the Unitil project. Greatly appreciated. I see them every day in Townsend, and it's great. So, and I don't really know if you need somebody to come in and analyze it all, because I think you all really know what you want to do with it. So, and I think you're in the right track. All right, next thing. In last week's meeting, Selectman McQuaid, when talking about the building committee, said we should not waste any time to put this together because we are running out of time for the spring meeting to have a package together. It seems like there is a rush to push this through instead of taking time and getting it right. I think the committee should wait until the following year because we should know what effect some of the houses being built up on Howard Street is going to affect the school. And with the senior development going on down in Whalum, I think,
Tri-Town.
Tri-Town, people might be selling their houses and moving into that, and that creates more openings in the town for more children. Say 1/3 of those units go to Lunenburg residents. That means that those houses are up for sale. My house is a 4-bedroom house. Somewhere along the line, I'm going to downsize. Somebody's going to fill that up with kids, probably. So anyways, I think that should be taken into consideration. I think that if someone drops off the committee, there should be an associate member so that at all the time, and the knowledge is not lost, and there would be not an even amount on the committee. One of the solutions to the Passios building is vacating 2 other buildings. This brings 4 buildings into question at town meeting if you rush to get it into spring town meeting. And that hasn't been successful in the past. For the second time this year, I'm going to agree with the board chair.
I didn't realize that was...
I've been counting them.
A marker,
I've been
but
counting them. Tom, you said that we should only address 1 building in the year, and that's the primary school. And that way there, then at least you have an accomplishment. So, anyways, I just wanted to bring that forward, okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we did announcements already.
You got one more comment?
Ah, sorry, sir. Thank you.
Good evening. First time here.
Welcome.
I'm here to discuss your favorite subject, the trees on Lancaster Ave.
All right.
Quickly.
This is our current favorite
Okay.
subject, by the way.
First of all, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought I heard at one of the other meetings that the trees were marked down there. I just went down, I drove all the way down to 900. I didn't find a single tree that was marked. And I didn't find a single tree that was really causing a problem. All right? I mean, I don't know what their proposal is as far as what they're gonna do, but maybe you ought to leave it up to your tree warden and just say, forget about it for now, you know what I mean? Let's see, what was the
Did
other
you
thing?
introduce yourself first? I should ask to state your name and your address.
Oh, didn't I do that already?
I don't believe you did, but...
Oh, no? Okay, Ron Dion, White Street.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, in reference to those tree things there, my suggestion would be, I thought there was going to be a meeting because it was on the agenda, but I didn't know how detailed it was going to be, so that's why I came. And I see that there's nobody here from Unitil or anybody else, or your council here, not here either, because I had a suggestion for him, or for you people through him, and that's to look and see if you people can really delegate private property, trees on private properties, but that would be something for your council to come up with. You know, he'd be able to answer that question. Because I don't think any of one of you are lawyers, are you?
No. Well, I can answer the question. The trees on private property have to get the approval of the property owner.
Even from the town?
No, they don't have to get approval from the town. They have to
No.
get approval from the property owner, although
Well,
the ones
that's
that are
what
the
that was my
scenic
point.
road ones
That
may
was my
have to get
point.
approval. The ones
They
that
have
are,
to, you know, that's the dealing between Unitil and them,
right.
but not here.
It's because Leominster Road and Lancaster Avenue are designated scenic roads, there are some trees that even property owners have, even if they want them down, have to come, and the planning board has the approval of their scenic
Oh,
road
sure.
trees.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah, I understand that.
The trees that we're looking at are, I think we're around 32 with the trees that we
Yeah,
are
well,
public trees.
I heard that count. I heard that count at the last meeting.
It only
the
goes
last
up to
meeting
Rolling
about
Acres.
it, yeah.
It only goes up to Rolling Acres Road.
On Lancaster.
It only, on Lancaster, it only goes up to Rolling Acres Road. It's a really small area.
But I thought I heard a number like 600 or 661 or something like that was either the beginning or the starting point from where the
Number
trees
of
were
trees?
located. That's what
No,
I
the
thought I had
address,
heard.
No, the addresses. No, there's like a mile area when if you take from Rolling Acres up to Town Center and then down Leominster, it's approximately a mile of road that.
Oh, you're going down Leominster
Yeah.
Ave too?
To West Street.
Oh,
To west, to the West Street corner, yeah.
I didn't hear that mentioned at all.
Yeah.
I
So
didn't hear
Rolling
that.
Acres up to the lights, and then from the lights down to west on Leominster. That's the whole area they're talking about.
Oh, okay.
And they want to get like
Oh,
seven,
okay,
it's like
okay.
72 trees they want to take down in that small
Total, right.
area.
All right.
And Heather, what is the date of when the public hearing is continuing?
That has to be decided because we asked the planning board if they could move it to September 24th, a Tuesday.
Because there will be a night where we go specifically back into the topic with Unitil coming up. But I guess the date's to be
I was just going to
determined.
say, you know, because 6.5 hours or 6+ hours discussing these trees is kind of like going over the board a little bit.
Welcome to the Board of
Too much
Selectmen
discussion about trees.
Right.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you very much for being patient.
And thank you for coming and having the public comment. 7:05, a quarterly financial report with our finance director, Karen Brochu. Welcome.
Unless you want to wait till 10:30. We used to do that.
11 would be better for me.
Be careful what you ask for.
I know you guys sometimes go till midnight, so. Okay, I know that you received the fourth quarter revenue and expenditure reports. What I'll do is I'll just read the summary that goes along with the reports, and if there's any questions at the end, then I'd be happy to answer them. Okay, so as far as revenues go, the total collections for FY19 were $40,740,654. Our actuals exceeded estimates by 0.22%, or a total of $88,772.34. Some of the things I'd like to highlight are our local receipts. We exceeded our local receipt estimate by $314,519, or 10.45%. Within that category, within that grouping, there were several categories that exceeded estimates, and some of those are our meals tax, which we collected 105% of, or $4,867 than we had originally estimated. Fees, we collected 103.41% of that amount, or $5,505 more than what we had originally estimated. Motor vehicle excise, we collected 114% of our estimate, or $228,432 more than what we had originally estimated. Investment income, we collected 182% of the estimate, or $50,865 more than what was originally estimated. Licenses and permits, we collected 124% of the estimate, or $49,965 more than what was originally estimated. And departmental revenue other, which is basically our ambulance receipts, we've collected 113% of that estimate, or $32,993 more. We also had a few categories that didn't meet our estimates, which included fines and forfeits, which were $2,502 lower than what we estimated. Departmental revenue schools, which was $20,379 lower than what we estimated. And penalties and interest, which was $37,527 lower than was estimated. So when all was said and done, because we had categories that exceeded our estimates along with the categories that didn't meet our estimates, we still had an overall surplus over our estimated local receipts of $314,519. Taxes. We collected 98.35% of the levy, or $441,858 less than what the levy estimate was. And we also received $143,696 in tax lien revenue. State aid, we received 100.82% of what was estimated, or $72,416 more. This increase was primarily due to an increase in our charter tuition reimbursement, and also the fact that we didn't receive our FY18 40S funding until FY19. On the expenditure side, we expended or encumbered $39,880,568, or 98.1% of budgeted expenditures. There were appropriation closeouts in the amount of $771,315. Our state assessments were $12,935 higher than our cherry sheet estimates. The increase in our state assessments was primarily due to changes in choice and charter tuition costs for students that go out of district. On the expenditure side, a few of the categories that I would like to highlight would be the salary reserve. There was an unappropriated balance in that account at year end of $57,303. Public buildings, there was an unexpended balance of $39,480, and that was primarily due to unexpended electricity costs. Facilities and grounds, there was an unexpended balance of $47,089, and that was primarily due to a vacant position. The police department, there was an unexpended balance of $50,869 at the end of the year. Police lockup, there was an unexpended balance of $18,501 at the end of the year. Building inspection, there was an unexpended balance of $51,620, and that was primarily due to a vacant position. The school department had an unexpended balance of $13,653. This amount reflects offsets that were made to the school department budget to account for the deficit in the choice charter tuition. Highway labor, there was an unexpended balance of $79,232, and that was primarily due to vacant positions. Vehicle maintenance, there was an unexpended balance of $25,999. Veterans benefits, there was an unexpended balance of $37,761. Unemployment compensation, there was a balance of $57,919, and that was due to the fact that we had limited benefits that were paid in FY19. Workers' comp and liability insurance, there was an unexpended balance of $37,753. And the last category was our health, life, and Medicare insurance, and that account had an overall balance of $219,324 at year end, and that was primarily attributable to the various vacant positions that were benefit eligible. So overall, we had a good year. Our undesignated fund balance at the close of the year is right around $1 million. So I would think that once all the reports are complete and the balance sheet is submitted to the state, that we would probably see free cash somewhere in the range of $1 million.
So I have a few questions. First of all, the tax is at 98.35. Is that typical? Is that in line?
That's typical.
Okay.
One of the things that helped us last year, and I wanted to put together a comparison, but I ran out of time, but on the revenue side, one of the things that helped us last year is we had the tax lien sale. So prior to that, we had a lot of people that came in and paid their taxes. So when everything gets closed out at the end of the year, in FY18, we collected $500,000 in tax lien revenue. So even though we only collected 98% of the actual current year levy, we had the $500,000, which brought us up over the 100% because of that. And this year, it's a little bit lower, but overall, at least the revenues are still to the positive by $88,000 total.
My other question is, these are incredible numbers for local receipts with some of these percentages over. I mean, investment income at 182%, motor vehicle excise. So you've been with Lunenburg a long time. What are some things that we should, be prepared to guard against? I highly doubt that we can keep up these numbers for long, and so we always worry about anticipating the same kind of returns.
Well, one of the things that I've said in all the gazillion years I've been here is that we should be conservative with our local receipt estimates always, because like when Heather talks about the budget and she talks about the local receipts, they're elastic revenues, so they're dependent on the economy. So the more conservative we are, the better off we are, because we could end up in a situation where we overestimate and then we would have to raise that revenue deficit in the next year. So although this looks really good on paper, I would continue to do what we have been doing and be conservative with those estimates, only because, like they say, it ain't cash and it ain't free, but we get the free cash and we have the ability to fund some things that we wouldn't normally be able to do without that. And if that free cash goes away, being the way that we have been over a number of years, putting monies away in reserves, when the time comes that it doesn't look this good and we're forced to rely on those funds, they'll be available to us. So we have a cushion as far as that goes. And also, like I said, I would continue to be conservative with the estimates, because that is our free cash. And if you looked at the overall increase in the revenues and what the impact would be if we upped the local receipt estimates in order to maybe offset taxes a little bit, what it would do to a normal residence would be minimal. Whereas the other way around, when we have $1 million in free cash, when we have $1.5 million in free cash, we have the ability to fund a lot of things that we wouldn't typically be able to do.
Thank you.
I have a question. It seems to me that motor vehicle excise at $228,000 is way more than anything else, and every year it's like this. I think that's one that we should try to estimate closer to the bone, much closer to the bone. I mean, it's like you're saying we're going to be able to fund things because we're cheating in our local receipts estimates. We're totally underestimating motor vehicle excise, and we do it every year. And so we're trying to get extra money to spend on stuff we can't afford.
Well, that's just,
I disagree, but
that's just guessing how many people are going to buy a new car this year.
No, I think, what does Keating and Powell pay in motor vehicle excise, for example?
I don't know. I would have to
they're
get that
consistent.
information.
If they were going to change drastically what they did with their vehicles, you could ask them to, listen, give us a heads up if you're going to do something drastically different with your vehicles. I mean, I'm sure when I drive down Leominster Road, I see a gazillion trucks that are commercial. I just think it's wrong to give ourselves $228,000 every year and go, wow, look at that. It's not a surprise. We do it every year.
I think that's much more flexible than you'd think, though. I mean, I bought a new truck this year. I paid an extra $1,000 in motor vehicle excise tax, and I'm one person. So it's not hard to add up to $200,000.
Well, I
If
haven't
the
bought it.
economy were less, we're not as good, that would not happen at all.
I haven't bought a new car since 2008.
Yeah, but again, it's still gambling on
So
how
you're
many
not
people.
adding to that number, and I wish you'd get to it.
You know, I just think when you look at all of these numbers, the motor vehicle excise stands out because it's just way overblown and it's a gigantic balloon. The other ones are like 5,000, maybe 50,000, but 228,000 is, I think, out of line.
No, I understand what you're saying, but I respectfully disagree.
And in this cluster, it's the most amount of actual money, but it's not the highest percent.
Right. Right.
So that's
percentage is
important to point out too, because the percentage that it's above by is not as much as the investment income and stuff. So it's just looking at one piece of where it's
Well, and I
ahead.
think.
But it's the money.
But I
It's the
think
amount.
have to-
But percent matters too in terms of how much it's over. And it's
I
not.
disagree.
It's the most amount of money
By a-
in these
by
four
a-
categories, but it's not the highest percent of overage.
So you can have 10% of $10, or you can have 50% of $2.
I think the
mean,
important thing is that it benefits us to be ahead rather than behind.
Oh, I
And
agree.
so
And I think,
I don't
like
know where
I
you
said, they're
find-
elastic revenues, so if the economy takes a dive.
When's the last time-
And we've over-budgeted those numbers, then it's going to have a negative impact on us the other way.
What I'd like to see is the amount of overestimate for motor vehicle excise over the last 10 years.
I can get that for you.
Because I'd like to see.
I've seen it where it was negative, where it was less than 100%, and probably after the last recession, so 2010, 2011.
And I think you have to look at, I don't think you, well, I mean, I can understand that you would want to look at motor vehicle excise because it's the largest number, but I also think that you need to look at all of the local receipts,
Right.
not just the motor vehicle excise. Because you may have motor vehicle excise that's $200,000 more than the estimate, but you may have other categories that are under, so that your local receipts overall only increase by, or potentially decrease.
But that wasn't the case this year.
And we have increased, we have increased the estimate to cover the $50,000 a year that we said we were going to put into pavement management in order to have that money available once we're done with the bond and everything, so
So if I-
that's
But
that's
something that we were
50,000 out of a
committed to
million.
doing.
Right.
So if I may ask
Well,
you,
20.
what is your concern? It's not like we lose the money, so what is your concern about making the estimates closer to the actuals?
Because
What do you gain from doing that?
you're budgeting closer to the bone. You're not going, hey, look at this, we have $1 million we can spend on stuff we wouldn't have had money for. You know, you're not being, in home budgeting, you know what you can afford. And this is artificially saying, oh, look, we got this money. Let's buy stuff.
But you're saying if we estimated it closer to the actual,
You'd have less free cash.
right, but you just spend it on other things, you think the money would just stay there? So that's what I'm asking you, because you're saying, oh,
Like
it's
you have less
artificial.
free cash.
Right, you want to, but what happened to the other money? That means people are going to say, well, we'll just appropriate it at town meeting. If you keep the estimates conservative for local receipts, then you can't at town meeting expend them because they're not
Right.
part of the budget. If
Right.
you increase those estimates, the money's just going to be spent. And then you run the risk as what the financial director is saying, that if they don't come in at 100%, then you wind up owing money at the end, which is never a good position to be in.
But we're so far away from that on the motor vehicle excise. It's,
But I just don't know, so the
It's just
220,000,
unrealistic.
if you put it in the budget, it would just be spent in a different way than you're saying we would get it on the backside.
Well, and I think having the
Well-
free cash and having the ability to fund things in your capital plan that you would otherwise probably have to go out and borrow for, because the needs of the capital plan are there, whether you have the free cash or not. And the free cash, having the free cash as a funding option eliminates a lot of those added costs that would be realized if you had to go out and issue debt in order to purchase those items.
but
or-
when you have to issue debt, you think longer and harder about purchasing. I think when you have free cash, you don't go through the same process.
Yeah, I think that's why we have a policy as well, is how free cash is expended as
expended.
well, and what it goes towards.
The
And
only
we
thing I
only
can
fund
think
it
of
for-
why you'd want to get closer, and this is certainly up for grabs, is that if you are too conservative, you may not hire a person who at the end of the year, when you have $1 million free cash, you may have hired during the year, but now you can't go back and
I would
hire
agree.
them.
I would agree.
That's the only thing, and I think there may be some positions coming up that has happened to, but I'd prefer, as you do, the conservative model better, in any regard. I think it's too easy if the money's in there to justify new positions when we probably should take long and hard look at those and not capital projects, which are one-time projects. You hire a person and you hire that person and their benefits ongoing.
And like Heather said, our policy is to use free cash for one-time expenditures, so.
Right.
Is there potentially a little compromise where it just adjusts a small amount, so it gets a little bit closer to what Phyllis is working towards, but still stays conservative? See what that gives us, so that, I mean, I think there's probably a little bit of a compromise there, where if there's benefits on either side, then maybe it could just go a skosh in a less conservative.
Well, but I
direction.
think, and I would agree, and I mean, that's Heather's call, but I would agree that we could look at the numbers and probably do some slight adjustments. But one of the things that you have to realize is, even looking at the revenues, the overall revenues only exceeded estimates by $88,000. So
Yeah. and that's
How
not a
did you
lot.
get to $1 million?
$1 million, what?
You said we're gonna have $1 million in free cash.
That's 'cause of
Well, I mean, we
unexpended.
had a lot of,
Second
a lot of
expenditures.
appropriation closeouts. We had $771,000 in appropriation closeouts, which flow to free cash as well.
And I, again, got to make my pitch for the capital plan, as I always do, because in the past, I feel like we have, or the economy, just the way things worked out, I think it was estimated more closely, and the capital plan budget was kind of lucky if it were $400,000 on a good year. And we always have well north of $1 million in requests. That doesn't change. It just is that way. So we were grossly underfunding it before, because there's no operational budget line item for capital plan items. It's all free cash is the capital plan cash. So it's the only place it gets funding. So if we want to come anywhere near funding it to the level of the requests that we get, we need to have situations like this where we can do it.
Yeah, but I think that we have to, capital planning has to ask more questions or look more closely at the requests, as was, I think, shown last year. So I think the more money you got, the faster it goes out the door.
Well, the other thing is, just because you have the free cash, you don't have to spend it.
Yeah, but they do.
No, we don't. We every year we contribute a great deal of money to the stabilization
That's right.
plan.
Yeah, but that's required, right?
No, the special purpose capital stabilization plan, to buy things like fire trucks and work on building projects, and we do not spend it all. We absolutely do not spend
We
it all.
usually leave a cushion too, so that there's a little bit of a buffer there for the next year in case something does happen with receipts and they drop off, so.
Okay. And
Or
after
with
what
anything,
you
with
said,
even appropriations.
where it actually just exceeded by 88,000, that feels like,
That's not a big
Not a
difference when
big
you're looking at a $40
yeah, so
million
I
budget.
really don't think we
Right.
need to pick at
Right.
that.
So overall, the revenues just exceeded estimates by 88,000, even though the individual category of local receipts,
Which is actually really close.
really close.
Yeah. And then
Too
all of that
close.
extra money comes from money that should have been spent but wasn't.
Right.
Like a missing employee.
Well,
that
and
wasn't hired.
the majority of the reason why
2%.
those funds weren't expended in the appropriations were because of vacant positions.
And overall, it looks like good news, right? So-
Yep. No, I would agree with that 100%. It is good news.
But I will get you that history on
Thanks.
motor vehicle excise so you can see it. And I'm sure we'll have more discussions about it as well.
Thank you.
Actually, if it could be a spreadsheet of all local receipts for the last, I don't know, about 10, whatever fits on one page in landscape, just all the local receipts, just going across what they were. number
less.
and as a percentage of
Well, I mean, I would have to update it for the later years, but I know I
But the
have a
actual-
spreadsheet that probably goes back to
Actual and
at
estimate.
So
least 10 years.
the number that we estimated, and then how much the percentage that we collected over
Okay.
or under, that we can look at it every year.
Can do.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Thank you, Karen.
You're welcome.
Thank you. As they say, 7:10, right on time. A pilot for 190 Electric Avenue, Borrego Solar, and the Regional Assessor Representative. Welcome to you both. If you could both introduce yourselves one at a time.
Sure. I'm Greg Roscher. I'm representing Borrego Solar for the project on 190 Electric.
And I am Diane Peterson, the consultant for Regional Resource Group, put together the pilot and work with Borrego Solar.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, I don't know who wants to start. I will say, as a predicate or a preface to the presentation, that this is an informational-only presentation. We're not asked and we're not going to take any votes on this. This is for us to hear what was developed and to have any questions, and the actual vote will be at a later date. So today it's just gathering information and hearing about how it was structured and what we're looking to do.
Sure. I'll start with the project.
Talk about the project.
Yeah, so we've been working with the town for about 18 months developing this project. It's a 2.5 megawatt ground-mounted solar project. We have gotten all the permits from the town. We've gotten interconnection approval from Unitil, and it's submitted into the Smart Solar program currently. It has all the criteria it needs to qualify for that program. We're just waiting for the program to be extended because right now it's totally full. Josh has met with you guys in the past. I think it was in March. He got approval to put a pilot topic on a meeting in May, and in May the Board of Selectmen was authorized to negotiate a pilot with us for the project. So Josh has worked closely with Diane to come up with numbers that work, and I'll leave it.
Okay. So what we get called in to do is to work with the developers on behalf of your town and look at the economics of the project. And under the SMART program, it's pretty regulated on what the reimbursement rate is for the developers on their projects. So what we do is a discounted cash flow analysis of all of the costs and the credits under the SMART program, and come up with a number that we believe is something in line with what a pilot agreement should be based on the economics of the project. And that's really all that we do, other than put together the pilot agreement. What you have before you is a draft of a KP Law product. We work closely with Copeland and Page on developing solar pilots across the state of Massachusetts under, well, we started with SREC 1, SREC 2, and now in SMART, and heading into SMART 2 sometime when the state decides to roll that out. But we've done quite a number of these projects, and we think we've put together a reasonable number for the town based on the economics of this project. Borrego entered into, I believe you're in block 3.
In Unitil, there's 4 blocks that are at capacity at this point, and when the program is extended, we would be first in line for that fifth block.
Oh, 5th block.
Yeah.
Okay. So the numbers that you're seeing before you in the draft for $22,410 a year, the company has rolled out a model that is a flat rate over 20 years, so the reconciliation yearly based on your new tax rate for personal property is something that has been kind of a struggle for assessors' offices. So if you have a number certain, it works. We find it works better, so there's not a lot of numbers to remember. Trying to find a draft or a executed agreement, and we can handle the reconciliation for the assessors if you need to at some point. But so there is an escalator built into the analysis, so that's, I think, a prior pilot you had with Nexamp had an escalator built into it, so the numbers were different from year 1 to year 20, but we've built that number into the analysis, so you have a flat rate going forward. So the number that we came up with,
Not a flat rate, but a flat
payment
assessment.
number,
Flat payment.
yeah. So on this particular project, we have $9,000 per megawatt DC. That's what we're proposing.
So for people who, again, there may be people who have listened through this before, but maybe there are new people listening to this program, hopefully. How does this compare? How does the pilot compare to the total number of taxes over the life of the project that would occur if we didn't go with a pilot, but we went with the standard property real property taxation model? As far as total over the 20 years.
So even in a pilot, you can use a depreciated method of an asset. Just depends on how you want to put that together. The reason why the state of Massachusetts, the Department of Revenue, encourages communities to participate in pilot agreements with the developer is to have a payment certain. You know who you're dealing with. You have a contractual obligation. The developers have a contractual obligation to make payments to the community, to follow through, submitting forms of list. When they change inventory, as technology advances, you may find that there is technology that will enhance the number of megawatts that are being produced on that farm. The contract covers those increases through the 20-year period. So there could be adjustments. It also covers things that could happen as natural disaster or I don't know what else would happen to a solar farm, but maybe a large moose would destruct a few panels out here on Lunenburg. I'm not sure, but so it does. Years ago, there was a problem with finding who was going to pay the bill, which is really why pilots became what they were. Through the Department of Revenue's encouragement and guidance with their local IGRs. And so over the years, these things have advanced. We get regular assignments. Developers aren't in these things for the long haul. They're assigned, they're part of portfolios. They move around. The ownership moves around. But we track that, and there is language in that agreement that requires the developers to do certain things. So in this particular draft, there is, if there is going to be an assignment, that information needs to come to the board prior to it getting assigned, so that you have the opportunity as a board to say, is this a credit-worthy assignee? And we can assist in that fact-checking for you if you need that. But that's pretty much why you want some assurances that you know who you're dealing with and you're going to continue to get payments on a regular basis.
But I don't think you answered the question.
No, I think in the beginning I said you can do a depreciated schedule if you like.
I'm interested to know, is the amount of tax the town receives the same if you do this as if you didn't have a pilot? That was the question. And you gave a lot of information, but I don't think maybe I'm just stupid, but I didn't hear the answer.
If you just bill the personal property,
Right.
without a pilot agreement.
Right.
With or without a pilot agreement. You could do it both ways. Just bill the personal property. It would be on a 10-year depreciated schedule. You'd get more revenue out of the income analysis because you're looking at the income of the project over a 20-year period. The depreciation on the equipment alone is what's depreciated over a 10-year period, just like the life of any personal property asset of any taxpayer in the town.
So I think the question is the total. So this total that you've given us, $22,000 a year they're
Yeah.
gonna pay, let's just round it to 20, is approximately $400,000 over 20 years.
Yeah.
If we didn't have a pilot, would they still be paying in a different format for approximately the same amount of money over the life of the project?
They'd be paying less,
Okay, that's what,
right?
okay.
Because of depreciation?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay. Thank you.
yeah.
Any other questions? Have we sent this to legal yet?
Yes.
And-
So it's being reviewed right now.
Oh, that is being reviewed, okay.
Yes.
I'm assuming that the standard, especially since I think we have an agreement with Borrego in the past.
No,
No, we don't?
no,
Just
Nexamp
Nexamp,
was the
okay.
only other
I know
one.
Borrego's been before us.
So, we didn't really understand the format here, so we were, Borrego was prepared to submit their check for $1,500 to the board at the time of the signing. So I don't know what, if you'd like to postpone that, or do you expect them to come back out at the time you take a vote on it, or how is that going
I'll
to
ask
be
them.
Expect
processed?
it, yes, to return to a future meeting for the signing of the contract.
Okay.
One question, Selectman Jeffries asked me to ask was if the payments could be tied to the consumer price index. And I don't know exactly, without having more information, what he's,
Well, I think that they have, I think he's,
with
I think that.
Escalator.
Right, I think the
Yeah.
escalator you said was built in.
Yes, it
Right.
is.
Do you know what the percentage was, what the escalator was?
2.5%.
Right,
Okay.
so that answers his question.
okay.
CPI, is, inflation has been about
Right,
that.
right.
So,
Yeah.
One question I did have, because this project is slightly different than our other solar projects, it has battery storage, right? So how is that calculated differently?
That also is included in the analysis, so
Okay.
a battery, well, do you want to speak to battery storage in general, or what it does for the project, or?
Well, basically, it allows us to, when the sun's not shining, the energy that's stored during the day can be released and discharged later in the day at other peak hours, like in the early evening is a time when a lot of electricity is used. So that's the reason why battery storage is included. And I would say using the assessing based on income and the value of the project, that kind of bakes in the value of battery storage as opposed to the depreciation method that Diane mentioned.
Right.
I don't know if that.
So that gets released back into the grid at certain points of the day, and is it valued more because it's released at certain times when it's at peak hours?
Yeah, the project is valued more because when
I ask you to speak
oh sorry
louder and into the
sorry, the project is valued more because when the sun's not shining, the solar project's not producing electricity normally. It is when it includes battery storage. So that's adding kilowatt hours to the grid that are compensated for by the utility.
I think the question was, does the battery stored energy that gets released back, priced from a Unitil standpoint or from Borrego, is it priced higher than the solar generated panels when they're on?
Right.
No, it's not
So it's the
priced
same.
higher. The electricity itself is not priced higher. It's the SMART program does offer what's called an adder for battery storage per kilowatt hour. So it's through the SMART program, but the utility pays the same amount. If that makes sense.
Yep.
It just evens out the flow of electricity.
Right. Exactly. It flattens the bell curve.
Yeah.
Does that provide a benefit to the town of Lunenburg as far as?
It provides a benefit to the utility, to Unitil. But the town of Lunenburg, I don't believe, is an off-taker for the project. I don't know if you...
don't have that, no.
Yeah, I don't believe the town of Lunenburg is receiving the credits generated by the system. So in terms of, from a tax standpoint, yes, it's
Right, I was going to say,
benefiting
from a
the
tax
town.
standpoint,
Yeah.
clearly it does.
Yes.
Right. So you don't have a net metering or a PPA agreement with them, but you're Unitil district, but you get the benefit of all of that going back to the grid to have their lower green rate,
Okay.
Right.
That's kind of what
Yeah.
I was getting.
right?
Who does Borrego have net metering credits with?
Well, we look for offtake agreements with municipal entities. Could be large scale energy users that are private as well. Like right now, we're talking with Raytheon, the big military contractor, and Boston Medical Center. But we also sell electricity to towns as well, as long as their utility accounts are, I guess, high enough in electricity usage that it fits. So it really depends. And sometimes, actually a lot of times lately, we put our projects in what's called community solar programs. And that's, in those programs, the project will allocate 50% of the electricity to homeowners that sign up for the project, and the other 50% to a large scale user, whether it's like a Raytheon or a municipality.
May there be an opportunity to work with Lunenburg on this project?
Yeah, we would need, I actually would have to consult Josh on that. I don't know for sure, but I think...
Get your energy bill costs together. And that's what we would need to do before.
Right, we would have to do an
That's it.
analysis of your electricity usage data. I would have to consult Josh Farkas, my colleague, to see if we've lined up the project with, they call it anchor offtake for the large 50% of the electricity usage. This would go into a community solar program. So if we haven't lined up that 50% for a large scale user, then we'd certainly be interested in talking with the town about that.
Because I certainly do know people that aren't able to get into Nexamp because it's full. So there are people who would really be interested in Lunenburg.
Definitely keep that in mind.
A lot of people meaning like a community solar.
Right,
Yes.
residential. yes.
Oh,
Community
okay.
solar.
They're looking at residents.
Oh, you mean for town residents or?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Does the municipality have a
Oh, we have
Yes.
lots of them.
agreement? Okay.
Yeah, that's something we would have to look into. This is the only project in our portfolio in the Unitil service territory right now, so that could make it a little bit difficult to structure an agreement to market to town residents. But it's certainly something that we'd be interested in looking into.
Great.
Cool.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I thank you for presenting this. We will bring this, once we hear back from our town council, and then we'll ask for, well, I don't think we need more from our assessor's office. I think we have
Doesn't
everything we
seem
need
it.
at that point. So once we get it back from that, we'll schedule for the town manager. You'll be notified, and we'll schedule when we can sign.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
It'd be great if you had some information on homeowners.
Okay.
Okay.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just until check my other Unitil customer.
No interviews or appointments, right?
No.
Okay. Town manager report.
All right, announcement on existing vacancies. There's one regular member and 3 alternate vacancies on the Agricultural Commission, 1 vacancy on the Americans with Disabilities Act Commission, 1 design professional, craftsperson, or building contractor familiar with historic renovation for the Architectural Preservation District Commission, 1 position for the Finance Committee that's a joint appointment with that's appointed by the Finance Committee Appointing Committee, 1 elected position on the Housing Authority that's a joint appointment with the remaining Housing Authority members and the Selectmen, 1 elected position on the planning board, that would be a joint appointment with the remaining planning board and the selectmen. 2 elected positions for the sewer commission, that would be a joint appointment with the remaining sewer commission and the selectmen. And 1 regular member and 2 associate vacancies for the zoning board of appeals. And talent bank forms can be obtained on the town website or through the Board of Selectmen's office. And we did receive 2 talent bank forms for the sewer commission positions, and that would be at an upcoming meeting, the appointment. Turkey Hill Elementary School, Primary School, and TC Passios water sampling results. Recently, the school had sampling for lead and copper performed and some water taps at the Turkey Hill Elementary, Primary School, and TC Passios building had copper and lead levels above the mass action level for copper and lead in drinking water at schools and early education and child care facilities. The school superintendent sent me the notices that went home to all the families of children in each building, as well as the summer extended day families for the TC Passios building, and which are also posted on the school district website. This week, a letter was sent to all the families the students registered for the fall extended day program, and those were sent out as well. The school administration is working with the Lunenburg Water District and Mass DEP. Due to a concerned resident that reached out to the board and myself about questions on whether this is a problem with the town water, I reached out to the Water District Superintendent, Fran McNamara, to inquire about the procedures for testing for copper and lead. The water superintendent responded that the Water District does copper and lead sampling from sites approved by the Mass Department of Environmental Protection. Originally, the Water District sampled 40 samples around town yearly. Due to very good results, the district was put on reduced sampling, which is 20 samples taken every 3 years. If a round of sampling showed a failure, Mass DEP would require sampling to be taken yearly again. The water superintendent went on to say that the water district's water does not contain any copper and lead. The lead found in the school's water sampling came from the plumbing within the structure. There are no lead service lines in Lunenburg, and connections from the water main to residences does not use lead soldering to make the connections. Lead is used specifically within homes that have copper tubing. Copper tubing is common in most homes, but less now with most plumbers using plastic tubing. Lines that have not been flushed and that the water has sat in the plumbing for 6 hours or more may see elevated levels. The water district injects sodium hydroxide into the water that raises the pH of the water. A pH of 7.0 is neutral. Over the many years of sampling for copper and lead, the water district has determined that Lunenburg should have a pH in the water system in the area of 7.3. When the water district does their monthly bacteria testing, they also do tests for pH and chlorine levels. They're very confident that the pH levels throughout the water system are at a level adequate to limit the leaching of copper and lead from household plumbing. They do recommend that even with passing sampling requirements, that residents should flush the water until it's cold before using it for drinking or cooking. An update on the Mass DEP Recycling IQ Kit grant. We are currently advertising for 4 grant-funded positions that will be doing curbside checks on recycling and tracking the data. The positions were advertised in the Ledger, or on the town website, Indeed.com, and the town Facebook page. So please pass along the posting to anyone you know that is interested. Engineering services for year 2 of the MS4 permit. The Stormwater Task Force Committee, DPW Director, Land Use Director, and I met with the engineering firm CEI on Thursday, August 15th, to review all the associated tasks that need to be accomplished during year 2 and the time frame that each task will be accomplished. CEI is currently reviewing the contract, and we should be able to finalize it by next week. An update on the live streaming meetings through YouTube. As a follow-up to an action item at the last Selectmen's meeting, I reached out to the cable manager that the live streaming feed was not able to be accessed. The cable manager responded. At that time, it was a server-related issue regarding updating a code and that it had been fixed. However, the cable manager contacted me yesterday that because there is music behind our bulletin, she has received a notice that the stream has been suspended for policy violations. And that means the music is copyrighted and will not air while the music is playing. She will try to find a workaround for this issue to get the meetings up and running again through the live streaming. An update on the intersection of Route 13 and Route 2A. Chief Marino reported that Montechusett Regional Planning Commission has submitted the required accident study to the Massachusetts Department of Transportation. Chief Marino spoke with Barry Lorian at Mass DOT, and Mass DOT will be performing a traffic count at that location once school traffic begins in September, and we'll be doing a site visit in early October to discuss the right lane turn issue and the left lane protection pulling out of Electric Ave when turning left. Mass DOT did relay that they will act in the best interest of the town, but ultimately the decision about any improvements to this intersection is up to Mass DOT.
Thank you.
So is this by Walmart or up at Route 13?
By Walmart and Asian Imperial, that intersection.
Okay.
Improvements to Leominster Shirley Road at the corner of Reservoir Road. The police chief and DPW director have been working with PJ Keatings on making improvements to Leominster Shirley Road at the corner of Reservoir Road. PJ Keatings has offered to do all the work on this corner to improve the line of sight, and the town will pay for the police details. Work had begun but had to be stopped until a better traffic plan and detour can be configured, as the road is very narrow and with limited line of sight.
That'll be a really big improvement. Thank you for
Yes.
your work on that.
No, I think thank you to the police chief and DPW director for approaching that issue.
Great. Thanks to them.
ADA self-evaluation and transition plan. Montechusett Regional Planning Commission has begun site visits to facilities to begin the self-evaluation process for ADA compliance as part of the district local technical assistance funding. And meetings I'll be attending, the police union negotiation meeting tomorrow, and a personnel committee meeting on Tuesday, August 27th. And that's all I have for tonight.
Excellent. Any questions for the town manager regarding the report?
No, I thought it was very clear. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would say is just in the water sampling. It looks like the superintendent said they sent out letters, but that's what she had obviously said, but I only got input through emails. And I feel like it's a school-based issue, but communication comes from so many different places that differentiating
An email
is
and
becoming more important. So a letter feels like there's other issues going on, school-related, where people are being told they'll get their replacement letters, and they're checking their mailbox, and then they say, check Power School. So we've received some emailing on this topic, but no formal type of letter has come in regards to any of my children. But we'll definitely have to check in with the school, because I always thought the results were high after summer or during the summer because the buildings aren't in use, but it says in here the 6 hours, and that really would happen every evening. And so a bubbler or some of these places that tested extremely high, if 6 hours is the time that it sort of builds back up, then that's sort of like a daily concern rather than a summer vacation problem. So we'll have to look into that.
But in the superintendent's correspondence, didn't it say that they weren't using those bubblers and things that had tested high? So
And
they're
the
wrapping
Copper's
them or
brand
something.
new, like that one is in the primary school, which is only from 2005. And last year when we had water warnings, it wasn't pertinent to that school. So it's just confusing to find out that there's lead in bubblers at all. But I pack my children water, so that's what I do.
I mean, how widespread is the problem? Because I got to believe that, I mean, Lunenburg can't be the only town. I mean, we have, as Mrs. Adams said, the primary school is, less than 14 years old, or less than that. what is, I mean, are people finding all the schools built in that area having the same problem? It would be,
Yeah, I
it
know.
would be, it's a rhetorical question. I didn't expect you, Madam Town Manager, to answer it, but, I mean, it's got to be something that people are addressing. I mean, you want to say that Passio's has it as an old school, I'm like, okay, I can get to that, but I can't get to the point of reconciling how, the new primary school is.
Well, last year, I think teachers were advised to like flush a couple bubblers, but I'm thinking of that one kid that gets in early every day and takes his drink.
Yeah.
So there is some concern there of what exactly this means. And I know last year I studied the results. This year I haven't looked at them specifically, but like the highest amounts were in the cafeteria at TCP. Probably because that water is utilized the least, has the least amount of flushing and everything. But certainly lead in water at schools is something that is, I mean, that's in the school's jurisdiction, but this is the second year we're talking about it. And it's like, I said, I mean, I solve the problem by telling my children not to drink the water, and I send plenty of water, and then they keep it in their locker and they give it to other people, hopefully for free.
I'm just interested in what other town, if other places are experiencing this. I mean, even with newer schools. So,
And does the Lunenburg Water District supply the water? Because I know that we have our own little water district, but all of this.
our water district doesn't, our water department, we don't have a water district. Our water department is just a billing area. It's not a provider of water.
Oh, okay. So all the water.
In those
comes from
water
Lunenburg.
departments, I think they come from Fitchburg, the water
It's
actually.
that end
Yeah,
of town.
it comes from Fitchburg. It doesn't even come from the water district.
Oh, okay, okay.
But we don't, Lunenburg doesn't, the town of Lunenburg doesn't provide the water.
So all of the water we're talking about comes through the Lunenburg Water
But it's not
District.
the water coming in, it's the school that's the
Right.
problem. That's
Right,
so
right.
like the solder and stuff like that.
It's funny that they only have to look at 20 sites every 3 years. That seems awfully,
Yeah,
not rigorous, but
I would agree. Especially given the water problems around the country.
right.
So, okay, thank you. All right, next, decision regarding the complaint about the Conservation Commission chairman. So, my next comments will be a brief announcement about what was decided in the executive session of last week. Because of the executive session and those minutes haven't been released, I won't take any questions about it. I will just announce what was done so people know. So we received a complaint about the chair of the Conservation Commission after the May 29th, some week or so after the May 29th meeting regarding the Lunenburg, the Lake Shirley Improvement Corporation. There were several things in the complaint. Any complaint filed in such a manner is incumbent upon the Board of Selectmen to notify the complainant. And we did, and that person has the opportunity to hear the complaint in open session or an executive session. The executive session was chosen last week after our regular meeting. We had an executive session about the complaint with the Conservation Commission chair, where it was determined that open meeting law was violated. That has already been determined by the state and by the commission itself during that evening. That there was the closing down of the meeting, which violated the open meeting law. And then in the public record police report, there were statements by the chair of that commission that we felt were inappropriate for a chair or any committee member, and that the situation as chair in controlling the meeting got out of control, and for various reasons, but certainly is within the chair's jurisdiction to keep meetings under control at all times. So we found those to be the transgressions of the chair. Then we weighed that against a 20-year history on the Conservation Commission, of which I believe 5 or 6 where he has been chair. He has had no other complaints during that period and has a clean record on that file. And weighing in the heated subject that had been kind of ongoing over several meetings, not to excuse certainly the behavior and the conduct, but just as a backdrop to that evening, and also the highly packed nature of the room where we had approximately 65 people in the lower Ritter meeting room. That added to the tension. The findings of the board was that the chair is to issue a public apology at their next meeting, next televised meeting, that we will set up and he will attend an open meeting law training that we will set up through the town, either through our town council or a designee for doing the training. And of course, this will go in a file of the chair in case there are other events down the road. That we felt as a board was our decision, and we felt that that decision really was appropriate to the act and to the situation that was presented that evening of May 29th, 2019. Earth removal permits and renewals.
So you want me to take over?
Sure.
Okay. So in your packet, there's a memo from the land use director, and I'll just read it. As you're aware, Gary Rhodes resigned from his position with the town of Lunenburg as of August 1st, 2019. Due to this, I have taken up the review and reporting on earth removal permits in the interim. The Select Board has a hearing scheduled for August 20th, 2019 to review and potentially renew these permits. Unfortunately, I will be out of town with my family at this time. Therefore, I respectfully request that the existing permits be renewed for 2 weeks until September 3rd, 2019 to allow for my attendance at the renewal hearings. I have forwarded my report and recommendations as of this date to the Select Board and have scheduled a site visit with PJ Keating for August 27th, 2019 to finalize my review prior to the date requested for the continuance. Please contact me if you require any additional information. So I would ask the board to renew the earth removal permits until September 3rd, at which time those applicants will come to the meeting and they can be discussed further and discuss whether be closed or renewed.
And they have been notified, correct?
Yes.
So they knew that this was offering and they had no problem with that?
Yes.
Okay.
I'd move that we renew all active earth removal permits for a period of 2 weeks until 3rd of September 2019.
Second?
Second.
All those in, further discussion?
Further
Sorry.
discussion, I have a question. There is a memo in here about the recommendation of accepting the closure of a permit. So rather than arbitrarily renew one that's being requested to be closed, should we amend re-permitting all of them and close the one at Powell's that they said they don't need renewed? Because we'd technically be renewing that one.
I think there's
as
a
well.
question about whether it's should be closed or not.
Okay, I just read the letter that
Yeah.
recommended that it be closed, so I just wanted to check on that. So
Okay.
with that further information, I would say
Okay.
I have no more discussion.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? None, it is unanimous. Okay. Discussion on creating minimum level spending committee.
This was your action item.
This is my action, minimum, I'd never even heard this called. Is this what okay, I gotcha. All right, so in the past, I'd never called it this, so now I know what you're talking about. In the past, we've had a kind of a subcommittee, or really it was more of an ad hoc committee, that were made up of the town manager. It was a non-voting ad hoc committee made up of the town manager, the superintendent, a member of the school committee, a member of the finance committee, and a member of the board of selectmen. That as things in the budget season, starting from, let's say, February 1st on to town meeting, as things were kind of fluid and a lot of things were getting discussed, it was a way for those boards and those offices to meet in order to discuss ideas to bring back to their boards for any votes. Again, it's a non-voting board. We just discuss things about what are on the table, and people were able to lay out their discussions. They would be open meetings, but again, no votes on anything. And it was a way to inform all of those bodies about all their ideas coming in and their ideas that would go out, so that we would have more dialogue. Because if we have this meeting and the school committee has their meeting and the finance committee has their meeting, unless you attend all of them, there's really never any dialogue that you can bring back. It was an opportunity. I felt when it was ongoing that it worked well. It helped to resolve and get things to smooth out the process, because you could explain someone else's position from another board or another office, like town manager or superintendent, and vice versa. That's what we had in the past. We had that probably for the larger tenure of when I was on the selectmen the last time. So probably of the 12 years I was on, maybe we had it for 9.
And what did you call your
It was just
group?
it was an ad hoc budget meeting. It was really just for budgeting, so that anything we could resolve between the boards, not to stop public comment at town meeting or town meeting participation, but at least the boards would be aligned, at least they would know where they were coming from, so that there wasn't kind of the friction that may happen on town meeting floor.
I think having the dialogue start in February in a collective way makes sense.
Yep.
Rather than, it always pushes up towards town meeting these days. And maybe we come up with a name.
Yeah, I'll look at what the name was. That's why I raised my eyebrows about the minimum level spending committee.
Yeah,
Because,
right.
it was really an
Just
ad
the
hoc
spending committee. Yeah, that'll work.
Is it a level service?
You know, I think
I'll find a name.
communication always
Sure.
improves a process, so I'd definitely be in favor of that.
Well, if we are in favor of it here, and I don't know that we have to vote on it but I'll send out a message to the finance committee and the school committee and see if they would like to reinstitute this from the past. And I don't even know if there's anybody on the school committee who remembers that being around, so.
I think Heather.
FinCom does.
I think Heather is the longest-standing member at this point.
Yeah. So anyway, I'll ask them if they're interested, and then if everybody's interested, then we can nominate people
Great.
to be on those. So they do have agendas, and there are public hearings, so.
Are they televised?
No, we don't, well, we generally didn't televise them, but that was years ago. I mean, we potentially could televise them. I mean, yeah, there's no necessarily any need to, but because anything that's done there will be discussed at the other boards. That was the whole point. And not that we're trying to exclude
I feel like
people.
it would be a good thing for people to tune into. Like,
Sure.
so if we can tape them.
Yeah. We can try that. So, what is the sense of the board? Is everybody?
Sounds good to me.
Okay, so we will, all right.
I think it's a
So
great idea.
I will write an email to the to FinCom and school committee.
Thank you.
I'll find out the old name. I don't think the old name was any more helpful than this name. And thank you for reminding me what that item was. Okay, minutes. I don't think there are, I don't see minutes.
No.
Okay, so warrants. Ooh, a double, a triple. No, it's not a triple, it's a double. So accounts payable in the amount of $308,527.22. And, can I fill this in? I'm gonna fill it in. Because Mrs. Adams is gonna ask me, and she's gonna look too. So now the numbers are met. Payroll in the amount of $609,625.48. And payroll deduction in the amount of $656,463.37. Action file issues. Nope.
All I
Okay.
can say is thank you for following up on the intersection and
Thanks to
the
Chief Marino.
live streaming and everything. It's nice to keep those things going. That intersection even made it to Facebook, and I just there's a lot to be upset about, but the threads are upsetting in and of themselves.
Everything makes it to Facebook. If there's one thing I've learned in the last 4 years, everything makes it to Facebook. And Twitter, which I'm not on. So.
But in all seriousness, when I first started asking about it, was a mother had contacted me because her 15-year-old was in one of the latest large accidents where 5 people were transported. And so that's why I just keep asking about it, because I don't want to hear about the next accident and feel like, wow, I was asked about that and I didn't. Sometimes being the broken record is part of keeping the conversation ahead, but you guys are all working on it, so thank you.
Committee reports. Any committee reports? Anybody?
Well, Heather made the Stormwater Task Force Committee report. Thank you very much. And I'm going to be attending the Central Mass Regional Stormwater Commission Coalition Steering Committee meeting on Thursday.
And I'll just add that Heather just sent out our first capital planning organizational email to get us going, so we'll start having reports on that soon.
Excellent.
Great. When do you meet? Or do you
We gotta figure that out, but she's rallied the troops now, so we'll
Okay.
get the schedule together.
Okay. Is Mr. Terry, when is he?
Told them 8:30.
Okay,
so-
whoa, okay, so he's cutting it close. Okay, take this one slowly. So the Unitil, so we have to wait for Attorney Terry to get here. Discussion by Unitil Storm Resiliency Program. So everybody should have received an email from the DPW Director and Tree Warden, Mr. Rodriguez, discussing this very subject. Did everybody receive it?
Yes.
And did everybody read it?
Yes.
Okay. So, I think probably this is not a surprise to most of us. I think this was probably what we expected. But I still think we should have this walk. Is he organizing that? He doesn't mention it in here.
The land use director is organizing the walk.
Okay. But as suspected, some trees probably are being recommended not to be cut and others, and he also recommends that we do. Oh, he said, and reconsider the hiring. I don't know what that means. Reconsidering that he's for it, or reconsidering that we shouldn't do it? Do you know what he is implying here? Have you had a discussion with him?
No, I haven't.
Okay. I'm not against, again, deciding, having somebody decide as a third party. I can't believe it would be that much money to have it done. But again, we should cross-catalog it with what was done in, I believe, 2015. But he indicates here that he walked the walk with somebody who's a local tree service company. I won't mention the name, but, and who's been doing this for many years, and says that many of the trees that they've targeted to take down are live and they're viable and they're not in failing health, so, which goes to Mrs. Adams' point that the storm resiliency, this just aids them so they can say, okay, we took away any potential objects that would fall on the wires, but if the tree is healthy, I don't see why we should be doing that. It doesn't help. It may help the power grid, although I don't know to what degree it helps the power grid, and it really hinders the aesthetics of why it's a scenic road to begin with. So with those being balanced, I'm not really personally terribly interested in removing healthy trees from, just because they're as tall as they are or closer than they are tall from the power lines.
Right.
Because they're perfectly healthy trees. I mean, that means you'd have this diminishing, all the trees would get high, they get low and they get higher, so a 50-foot tree, you'd have to cut if it's closer than 50 feet, which doesn't make any sense. Nobody would do that. Everybody would be living on a grass plain at that point. So,
Yes, I was at the Ritter Building when DPW Director Roddickens completed that walk with the local tree man, and they both agreed that, more than 50% of the trees that they're targeting are viable, 100-year-old, gorgeous trees that,
right.
They have committed no crime.
And I'm interested in hearing the data that we asked from Unitil, because I thought about it more and more. It's like, so the state has told them, and all the utility companies, that you have to work on the worst circuit in the state. And as anybody knows, of course, it doesn't matter how many you have. If you have 3, if you have 20, there's going to be one that's worse. I'm interested in how much worse it is.
Right.
Because if all of them came in at 85% and one of them came in at 83%, I don't want you to cut down trees to get the last 2%. That doesn't make any sense to me. Mm-hmm. And I want to see what the numbers are and how they rated them. And I think that was really what was lacking at the initial meeting.
Right. I mean, you can have numbers tell you anything. Any story you want to tell, you can manipulate numbers.
Right. So,
And those numbers are, I guess, good backup, but just personally, they're not going to affect the way I feel about it, I don't think. The trees, dead branches should be cut, dead and dying trees should be cut, but anything that's healthy or a chance of life, I don't think is worth it just to bump the resiliency of the electric grid a little bit. The 100-year-old tree is more important than the wire that hasn't even been there as long.
yep. I think I get the sense that we're unanimous, although I don't want to speak for everybody.
Yeah, no, and I think the important thing is for anybody who has picked up on the conversation without listening to the planning board meeting where we all were, is the storm resiliency program is something that is sort of invented and defined by Unitil. And they set up their funding to say, if you go into the program, we will fund the tree removal. When we ask questions, say, if we only want to remove half the recommended trees because we want to keep the viable ones, we fall out of that program that they've designed and defined. And so we're really working off of what they want to do with our trees or the town trees. And I think we've picked up on that, and we're going to probably proceed by doing what is right for the trees. And I had public commented in the beginning because it was on the forefront of my mind, but the important thing is that as we say that we're not potentially in favor of the storm resiliency program, that's not connected to normal pruning and maintenance, that would still continue, and that I don't think anybody's against pruning, and like Damon said, the dead trees and everything. All that is normal and should be done. But the storm resiliency program, all I could think of and I asked is that what they did in Townsend? And Unitil said yes. And the roads that I've traveled in Townsend where that took place, it really becomes a clear cutting of all the trees. Mm-hmm. And in an area that's historic with some beautiful trees, clear cutting. And like I had said, and I mean, we're all in agreement anyways, but you remove the trees, it doesn't remove hazard. So if you have a microburst or a little tornado touchdown or a gigantic hurricane and the winds could just snap the pole. So you've removed all your trees and then the wind snaps the pole. Right. And they still got to call the linemen and the pole guy, and we've taken our trees and we haven't prevented power outages. Yep. I don't think that they can convince me that they're going to prevent power outages even if they take the trees. So I think we're on the right track, and I really appreciate Jack and everyone going out and really taking a look at it, because even though we're only talking about a small area right now, what they're trying to get communities to do is to take this program even further than their initial areas, and I don't think we need to do that to our landscape. So.
On a technical note, I don't know that Unitil came up with the program. I think the DPU came up with the program.
Okay.
But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But yes, if it goes as they indicated to us, if we modify it to a large degree, the funding will fall out of that program. When I'm like, well, I mean, what do you want me to say? I'm here to protect the town. So.
You really have to get close to almost 100% of their recommended removal, which was 72
we'll see.
trees.
We'll see how much leeway. That's what they said. We'll see how much leeway they have.
So part of the reason this was an agenda topic was to also see if there were any further questions you had for Unitil for the next hearing date. Any more additional information
Not ones that I
that
did
they
not.
can come to that meeting
Yeah,
to?
not ones that not for me, none that I didn't already say at that meeting, and I really stand behind what the chair, Matt Allison, said at the meeting, is like, I would encourage them, instead of, to review the meeting is on YouTube, review it and find the questions that we asked. They didn't have anybody there taking notes, they didn't have anybody there, logging this, and then they asked us to come up with the questions that we asked that night, which is really incumbent upon them to do.
Like that you said, they didn't have anybody logging it.
Yeah.
I have a question, and that would be, they didn't really define it, but they would fund the tree removal if you buy into the gigantic program. And then they do their standard maintenance. But then we have this gray area that we've started to discuss, which is remove some of the recommended dead and this and that. And if we don't buy into the storm resiliency program, then they don't fund it. I would be curious, or they don't have the funding for it, and But I'd be curious to ask if they would work with us to fund a portion of the program, or a lesser percentage of the tree removal, because she sounded like they wouldn't, because they're really pushing for this outcome. And I'd like to know if they would participate in funding some of it, because it would benefit their grid no matter what dead weight was removed.
I think she said they couldn't do it under the storm resiliency program, but they would do it as a matter of their other program.
That's what I understood
But
as
that's where
well.
I'd want some specific commitment.
She's not going to offer that, and what I would say as a strategy, and I don't even care that this is on TV, because I want her to know the strategy, is that we should decide what we want to decide, and then come to them and say, this is what we agree with, how are you going to handle this? And if they come back because they intimated that they would just tell the DPU, well, they didn't go with our program, and my counter to that would be, we'll write a letter to the DPU saying, yes, we did not agree with their whole program. We agreed with this portion of it that are critical trees, and now they've identified the critical trees, and so we want to work with them, but they can't just up and leave it and say, okay, well, now we're not doing it because we didn't go with the whole thing. I want to protect ourselves against DPU if they're going to do that. I don't think they'll do that. When pressed, I think they want to take the trees down because eventually it caused them overtime and a lot of things anyway.
So that would be my question, is just having them define how they would participate if we alter their recommendations.
And, we may actually have questions once we take the walk.
Right, well.
Yeah, and I can read the list of items that the land use director sent to Unitil after that meeting as well, if it helps to.
Is that on the drive?
No, I'll just read it from an email that he had CC'd me on. A better coalition of the tree data, specifically having a unique identifier or other common notation that will allow each of the independent forms or tables to be cross-referenced. A map that locates all of the trees to be removed or trimmed that are being discussed. More specific information on tree replacement, perhaps including species, quantities, timing, etc. Information on if, how, timing, ballpark cost of moving the wires underground. I understand this is well outside the scope of the discussion, but some general information may clarify the reality of this being an option or not. If you can provide some quantitative data on outages, customers affected, relation to pruning and vegetation management, this may assist in further clarifying the issue and request to perform the storm resiliency program. Provide the boards with the total number of trees to be removed, public and private. If you are removing a large number of private trees that are not covered by the Public Shade Tree Act, it may help to provide a breakdown of those covered and those not included, and a priority ranking of trees to be removed. And he also suggested providing several locations that the storm resiliency program was successfully implemented and how long ago the cutting was. And so if you were interested in visiting those sites, it'll give you an opportunity to view it.
The Storm Resiliency Memorial Drive program, yes.
If there was a map of the trees to be potentially removed, it would be nice to know which ones are public and which ones are private, and which ones the private people need to get town permission from because.
Well, I think that's what the walk is about. I mean, Jack obviously knows that, and after walking with it several times with the Dave Clapham from Unitil, and then with the tree service owner here, so he knows that already.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
And I think that walk is going to be the next big thing that we need to do in this issue.
I agree.
Do you know when Adam is planning it?
He asked them to send some potential dates, and he'd coordinate
During
it once
peak
he got
foliage,
that.
so we can really appreciate what we lose.
Yeah, exactly. Any other?
But before the leaves fall off, so they don't all just look dead.
Yeah.
Look, that's right. In February, everything looks dead.
Two quick, sorry, I forgot to mention this before. Selectman Jeffries asked me to mention he is going to PJ Keating's for a site visit related to the earth removal permits on the 27th, I believe.
Of August?
Sorry. This Thursday, 8 a.m. Sorry. And next Thursday morning, he's going to have the tour of the town facilities. He requested, and I set up for him, that Kit Walker, our facilities director.
Is that open?
If anyone else wants to attend, let me know. I'll let Kit know.
Can you let everybody know when
And
he's
then if
planning
there's a
it?
quorum, I will need to post. So
I would do a facilities tour, but when was it, and is it up to?
8 a.m. on next Thursday.
What's the date next Thursday?
The 29th.
Today's the 20th. Yeah, 29th.
All right.
We can let the town manager know.
Yeah,
Okay.
just email me.
And I would keep it to 2, and I will purposely not go so we don't have a quorum. Okay, any other comments on the storm resiliency, or we move on?
Move on.
All right, on we go. Discussion with Labor Council on the process of conducting town manager annual evaluation. You purposely took that slow, that last item, to allow you to arrive, so welcome,
Thank you.
Mr. Terry.
I would have been interested in the beginning of the conversation about trees, but
Yes, it was almost a Joyce Kilmer moment.
I do that.
so how can I help?
So we have just concluded the approval among the board of the town manager evaluation form, and that has gone well with us. We just wanted to go over what seemed to be some remaining questions about how we can do the evaluation when it comes to the written composite evaluation and the individual evaluation forms that each one of us are required to write. That's topic 1. Topic 2 is, and those are the ones I had, and then of course members may have other ones either before or after the conversation. But that is the ability of a question about the ability of the board members during the town manager evaluation to be able to talk with department heads on certain topics or certain subject areas in the town manager evaluation that would relate to us knowing how that's being fulfilled other than our own interaction with the town manager at these meetings and privately. Those are the 2 items in question.
Okay. So let me maybe start by trying to answer as best I can. I think the second question might lead to more questions for myself about what the document looks like. But let me sort of start with some overview comments about both those points. And I know the first of those 2 questions is something I think we had some extensive conversation on back in the springtime and before you, Mr. Alonso, were on the board. And the general premise is this. You can really come to agreement with the town manager about the process that you want to use. The one piece that we always have to be mindful about is the open meeting law. And the open meeting law basically says that when you're doing a composite form evaluation, as a board collectively, you're doing an evaluation for one person, and you choose to have each individual do an individual evaluation as you have, and submit them to somebody, presumably the chair, most often the chair, to compile. The thing you have to be mindful of are kind of two specific pieces. One is that once that composite is put together, it can't be shared with the board members in advance of the public meeting unless it's generally available to the public at large. So if, for example, you said, well, we're just going to put it up on the town website before your meeting, then the board members, like every other member of the community, could see it in advance. So that's sort of one issue. The other relates to the individual evaluations. That is, the documents that each of you do and submit, for example, to the chair to form the composite. And generally speaking, the law is that those individual documents are a part of the town manager, in this case, the town manager's personnel file. That is, can be in conflict with another provision of the open meeting law that says that any document that is relied upon, is present and relied upon, and that's the way it's been interpreted, it's not exact language, present and relied upon in an open meeting becomes a public record. And that would be true for any set of documents. It's not unique. It's just, it's not unique to personnel file documents. It just is an application of that premise. If you had other confidential documents that somebody either knowingly or unknowingly sort of said, well, I have this document here, and they start referring to it, there's at least an argument that becomes a public record as well. I think there's an open question about intentional versus unintentional disclosure, but that's not really relevant to this discussion. So the long and the short of it is that if any one member or all four members, or like you have a fifth now, right? All five members referred to their individual evaluations because they pick it up and they say, well, I just wanted to make sure I quoted one thing from my document that I think is important to say. That makes that document a public record. And if each of the five of you did that, that would make each of your individual evaluations a public record. So that's pretty, I think, cut and dry. There was a court case that came out within the last couple of years that kind of really put a finer point on that. It did cause the Attorney General to clarify some of the guidance it had published before that I think was consistent with what the court said and consistent with what I've shared with you, but just wasn't clear in how it was communicated. So that's really, I think, the answer to the first question, if I understand the question right. The second part about can you, as individual board members or somehow as a board collectively, confer with other individuals in town, right? Whether, I guess, they're department heads or other employees. There's no law that says you can't do that, okay? That's really a matter of contract between what you've negotiated with the town manager and with the board as to what the process is going to look like. I think, and this is where I was going to pose a question back to the board, I have not seen the evaluation instrument itself, not back in the spring, not now. So I don't know what you've used in the past, and I don't know what you intend to use for the future. If there is a provision that has been negotiated and agreed upon that says, you know, working relationships with department heads, as an example, or with employees, it would seem to make sense that conversations would occur to understand that. I would say that pragmatically, although there's nothing unlawful about doing that, it does present some challenges that I think common sense challenges that I'm sure the board members can think through around how do you make sure that one person's opinion isn't overly weighted? How do you make sure that there's an opportunity to hear about the point of concern from both sides? And I think certainly a suggestion to the board would be that if there is an opportunity taken by a board member or multiple board members to talk to, pick on the police chief because he's sitting here, about the relationship or working relationship he has with the town manager, and there's either a pro or a con raised, it may be appropriate pragmatically to have a conversation with the town manager about that before necessarily writing it in the evaluation. Just, I think that's a matter of equity and trying to make sure that the process is comprehensive and fair. So those are kind of my introductory comments or introductory answers. I'm happy to try to clarify.
So I want to outline a process that I would like to use, taking into full consideration what you just said about open meeting laws. So let's leave the question 2 alone for a second. our process would be that when the season comes for evaluations, that each one of the individuals on the Board of Selectmen writes an individual evaluation, and we can get you the form if you need to review it. I don't necessarily think it's pertinent to this conversation.
I understand.
When that is final, when all of those have completed, part of that is they would write it. When the town manager presents his or her self-evaluation, at that point, each of the members would schedule a personal meeting with the town manager to go over his or her self-evaluation and their own evaluation of the town manager and have that discussion. When that process is complete, all of the 5, or however many people are on the board, but let's just say 5, including the chairs, would come to the chair, who would write the composite report that would be the public record. That document would be presented at an open meeting, such as tonight, and be distributed to everybody for their first reading. There would be no vote at that first meeting, just like there was not this past spring. Once it was presented, the board members would have access to each other's, which are now completed, document for the purpose of that next week to the next meeting to review everybody's, compare it to the composite, to be able to discern for themselves whether the composite is a fair blend of all the 5 evaluations. At which point, at the next meeting, the composite would be discussed and voted on and agreed upon at that point. Is that, one thing for you, is that legal? Does that follow the proper requisites that we need with open meeting law? And number 2, from the members of the board, outside of your opinion, is that a process that suits you, that could be, that you could live with to be able to get to the final document?
Yeah, so I think the one little piece that I'm thinking about is, and I don't think that there's clear guidance on it one way or the other, to be perfectly blunt, whether or not the review of others' individual comments amounts to the same kind of deliberation that the court was concerned about and the AG is concerned about by advanced review of the individuals. I don't think it does, I mean, to be honest with you. The process that the court, the SJC, said was not permitted before was saying before you came in and met in open session for everybody to see the composite. And the reason they had a problem with that was because it amounted to deliberation, which legally is the process of you discussing and knowing what everybody else is thinking, right? And just for the record, this is not a case, obviously, about the town of Lunenburg. I think it was Wayland, if I remember right. But it was a very common process for a lot of boards, school committees, boards of selectmen to follow. And so from that, what I take is that the problem is knowing about something and how the majority of the board feels before an open meeting, or outside of an open meeting. Here, what you've posited is a scenario in which the composite would be made available publicly. The board members would be able to see it. And then the exercise would be going back and saying, well, let me go look at the individuals, my own and others, to see that the composite before I voted is a fair and accurate statement of what we've all said. You're going back to kind of look and verify that.
Right.
Like I said, I don't think there's a clean answer on it. I think given the way the SJC reasoned through this before, it is likely okay. I just have, I think the place where you could have potential concern is if there are things that are reflected in, say, one of the four or 5 or more than that, that aren't carried forward in the composite, then you do potentially have the scenario of saying, Mr. Alonso's individual evaluation raised a particular point, it wasn't in the composite, which is unlikely to occur as the chair, but just take it as an example. And then it's not discussed, right, because it hasn't been put on the table, but then other members of the board go and look and are now aware of something that was included in that written document when that particular issue wasn't placed into the public sphere in open session. That's the place where I think you could potentially have the problem. The challenge with that, of course, is you don't know whether you have that problem until everybody looks at it. Right. And I'm not sure that I've got a workaround that really fixes that problem. But that's,
Well, I think my one potential workaround is in establishing this policy, and I think it needs to be a one-page policy that shows all the steps, is that it is vital in that if people don't agree with the composite, that they don't cite specific ones, because then they are being relied upon. They could just say, there are mentions in other places that don't characterize this and don't mention any one particular document. I think that's going to be imperative for all of us to state that that's what they believe.
Yeah, and I understand that. I would, and I don't know that I could give a better answer than what I've given in terms of this one particular point of concern I have. Take that out, and I don't think there's any concern about it at all, because as board members, you are the appointing authority for the town manager. You do have a right to be looking at performance evaluation related material for her as your appointee. And so, this is, like I said, the only issue is really potentially, is there something in those documents that has not been discussed publicly first that by virtue of the review is unearthed? I think that's unlikely, but it's at least a possibility I have to make you aware.
Fair enough.
I would think that it might be likely because it's a composite. It's not, you're not retelling everything everybody puts in it. So there will be things that are in our individual.
No, that's what he's saying. He's going to say that somebody makes a point that this wasn't included, and all of a sudden you reference another evaluation. That's what his point is. That if you say, I don't agree with the composite, and the reason I don't is because in this person's evaluation, they mentioned this one phrase, now you've referenced the document, and now the document becomes open, a public document. I think that's what the Attorney Terry is.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, I think that's a valid point. My position was, or my statement was a little bit different in that, just from an open meeting compliance perspective, let's say for the sake of argument that one person raises a concern about issue X. That doesn't make it into the composite, right? So therefore it has not been put into the public sphere by the discussion of the composite in open session. When the remaining board members do the review of each other's individual evaluations, they now the other four learn about this issue X that was not in the composite. Never mind whether you ultimately amend the composite to include it or not. Fundamentally, there is exploration of information that is not discussed publicly just in the exact same way that if you hadn't talked about the composite but had publicly but had shared it with other people before, you are sharing some information that is or needs to be disclosed and discussed publicly rather than deliberated over privately, which is functionally what's happening. I would offer, just this one point, and this is really experience, not law. Most boards that I work with, when they've worked through these issues, they've relied upon the individual members of the board who have all done their individual evaluation and give it to the chair for a composite to be their judge, right? So if Mr. Alonso, you're the chair, Mr. McQuaid submits an individual evaluation to you, he's the one who's kind of monitoring the comments and the totality of the composite to decide whether he feels, based on what he's contributed, that that's a fair representation of the evaluation of the town manager. And everybody else does the same. So, and I can say, I've shared this with you before, I serve on a school committee in my community. When we've done this process, which is very similar to what you described, but the composite is just presented and it's voted on the first time, we all take the opportunity to read through it and to make sure that we're comfortable that it represents our view, right, regardless of how you got there. It's just another option, it's another approach. It's not to say that it's the right or the wrong way to do it, but rather to say that if the ultimate concern is about the composite being a fair and accurate representation, if you can trust each of the individual board members to monitor the composite for their own opinion, to make sure they're comfortable with it, that is another way of looking at it. Obviously, there's discretion involved by the chair. There's no way you can bring all of it together unless you literally just cut and paste each individual's comments on each individual criteria, if that's the way your document's set up. So for whatever that's worth,
I think there's a difference. I think philosophically, there's a difference between saying, as a board member, do I hear my voice in the composite versus do I think the composite, having read all the other ones, is tonally fair in its assessment. That those are two different vantage points.
Mr. Chair, I have a question, if that's
Yes.
okay. I feel like last year there was some reason we weren't allowed to bring our originals, like that they wanted to avoid our personal ones from being part of public record, which was why that pathway was created, so that only the composite came.
Because that's contractually what the town manager's contract says.
Right. So in this case, you're saying we see everybody's. That makes it public record. Doesn't that go against?
It makes it
contractual
public
situation that
record
guided us?
if the document is present in an open meeting and referred to.
Right.
So it literally has to be sort of sitting in front of you and have somebody refer to it and say, well, in mine, I said.
So through
as
what
opposed to
format do
review.
we receive everyone else's? Because then we're circulating emails amongst the five of us.
No, you don't
but
circulate any email. You just get to read them.
Where, how?
It doesn't matter whether it's a printed form or something. Between the time that the composite gets presented at a public meeting and the time it's voted on.
I think the important point is not here, not during your open meeting, but the meeting adjourns. The next day, you make an appointment to go into the town manager's office and say, I want to look at everybody else's individual. So you're doing that on your own, which takes it out of.
Right, we have to really define that because then
Right.
it starts to feel like there's pieces of information we're all looking at and not bringing here.
Right.
And that's where people
There'd be
start to feel.
more than likely, there'd be one printed copy that would be kept at town hall, and that's where people would have to go to read them.
And then through an email, we would be invited at a certain time to go read everybody's, or
Right,
be
that's
able
what I'm
to
saying.
review everyone's. Okay.
Yep.
Because we weren't, because I know last year, it almost came to the point where personal ones ended up at the meeting, and then they would have been public record if we.
Well, the fact that
read
you
from
bring
them.
it, I bring a whole stack of things.
But
These are not
if
public
we all
records
read
unless
the
I talk.
personal ones and then are discussing the personal ones, does discussing the record make it a public record?
If it's during an open session, yes, it does.
So I feel like we're walking down a path where we're going to set ourselves up to be discussing items that weren't supposed to become public record. They'll inadvertently become public record.
Yeah, because how can you discuss the composite?
So, then it will
Okay, that's
come to
it.
discuss the composite based on things we've read to contribute to, of which we really aren't supposed to reference. And then once we reference them, they're public record. I feel like we're back to some of the confusion of last year. So I'll mention something that I think will be better about next year, even if the process stayed very similar, was that we get the composite and then get a week to read it.
No, I
That
think
in
that's
and
what
of
Tom said.
itself, I know, I'm agreeing, that in and of itself solves a lot of last year's problems.
Yep.
Because Selectman Luck and I had to really dig in and say, nope, we're going to read this document. It was really a long document, and we don't want to discuss it till next week. And so I think if we set up a composite exists and we get time to read it and think about it and then discuss it, this process of reading individuals, I think we might just want to come and discuss it from our own perspective. Is our voice, if everybody here says their voice is in the composite, then it's a good composite. If we start reading everybody else's, I think it's getting confounded just thinking about it, because it starts to become a public record. If I say, well, Selectman Luck, in that document I read, you had said
Well, if you
what
say
I
that,
had
that's
said.
what you have, that's exactly what you have to
Then I see no
avoid.
value
Yeah.
in reviewing everything, because once you put it in there, how do you go into a discussion and start deciding what you can and can't know and what you can and can't say? I don't want to set myself up for that.
Well, if you feel like that, then you don't have to review them.
Yeah, that's
Right.
right.
You can certainly not review them.
Well,
Yeah.
the point, when we went through this last time, and maybe I wasn't explaining it well then, but exactly how you described and what Katie just said, if you feel your own voice was in there, you kind of, each one of us individually self-evaluate it versus seeing how the sausage was made, of how Tom didn't do a good job making a composite versus were all the individual voices included. And I think that's the important part, rather than, I don't care specifically what Katie said or what Phyllis said or Tom said, just as long as they all feel included in the final outcome, I think it's a good composite. So I don't have a desire to see your review or your review. As long as I feel my voice is heard, that's.
The question, okay, so I understand that. Nobody nobody in the process that I outlined would be forced to read the other people, but would you be against other people who want to see what other people wrote?
I think it complicates it for the citizens when we start discussing it and what is and isn't a public record. And I think if very quickly somebody's might accidentally become a public record because it gets discussed, and why set ourselves up for that? I think it protects Heather's contract and it protects public record laws if we just come with what we really didn't have an opportunity for last year was to feel like we could check the composite. I think if we are able to read it over, discuss it, and then, for example, and one of the most interesting things last year, it's like, was your voice heard? Well, for me, there was a couple interesting things where some things were added from my review that were negative, and like the positive part of my sentence was removed. So it wasn't about what's missing, it's about what was chosen. And it was chosen to paint my analysis as a slightly more negative on one thing than I would have written the sentence differently. So it's not just about what's not there, what is there, but I'll know that in the composite and can speak to my voice. And if we all speak to our own voice, this sharing of each individual document in the office, I think we just set ourselves up to make it more complicated than it needs to be.
And I think if we're going to share them, it's not productive if someone opts out. If we're going to share them, we all got to do it, because if two of us don't read them all and then someone else starts saying, well, this person said that. And
Well, you can't make it, well, I understand your point, but to that point, you can't make a selectman do anything.
I know, but
You just can't.
I'm just
So,
speaking
I
for
think they should all attend meetings, but they don't always. And, and then you can tell people, you should definitely have gone on the walkability study, but not everybody did. So,
But the
But you
difference
can't- you
being
can't
to fill
require
our minds with knowledge we can't discuss, to me, isn't productive. If I go on the walkability study, well, I'm putting knowledge in there that I can just talk about and discuss. So giving ourselves access to an opportunity to learn something that we can't actually utilize is unproductive.
But I kind of agree with Tom that it should be the selectmen's option whether they want to read them or not.
well, okay, I'll try again explaining what I don't feel the need to, and I wouldn't feel the need to unless I knew someone else was going to. Because if there's someone else is going to, then I feel it's my responsibility to give myself the same level of detail. So we should either all agree to do it, and so we can have productive conversation, or all agree not to do
But
it.
we can't converse about what we've all read, because if we mention each other's in any way, we're making them public records, and that's against the contract. I just don't think
well,
it's...
you could make your own. So to Mrs. Adams' point about that some things in this past cycle that were her voice, but were chosen, and she feels the more negative things were chosen than the other ones. I'd never read her evaluation, obviously, but you run the risk of making your own report if you reference it a public record. So you already, that threat already exists if you're going to fight, and this is where I come down on the state. I'm like, I think it's kind of a silly exercise that you don't have any executive session time to talk about a composite evaluation so that you can hammer out these things and get a document that everybody on the board can achieve. And yet I'm running against a brick wall in this. I just say that because I feel I have to say that. So I think you're always running the risk of doing that. I think it's a matter of self-control that you make sure that you don't say in my or in so-and-so's evaluation it says this, because then already you've kind of destroyed it. You have to be able to say that. But we get a lot of confidential documents that you can't say that with. So I trust the Board of Selectmen members to be able to not disclose things, that we shouldn't disclose. So, I mean, I put it there as a method because at the last round in the spring, it was determined how can I know that this is a fair composite if I don't see everybody else's. You're asking me if I hear mine, and you did hear your voice, but it wasn't the totality of your voice. Well, maybe if you read other people's, maybe you're like, the tone of this, whether you like it or not, represents the tone that's represented in these other evaluations. If the board, I'll go with what the board wants. I mean, I'm just offering it. That's why I offered to make this an option.
I think we've made a lot of changes that'll help, like talking about separating it over 2 different meetings. We changed the whole layout of how it reads. We are adding the numeric portion, which will help summarize it in a different way for people who are more data-oriented. I feel like we've made a lot of changes. Maybe we see how that feels before heading in this direction, because to me, this just feels like is going to create confusion.
Well, before last year, that's what we did, and I found it really helpful.
So I have a funny feeling we're split on this and that we're going to need to have this vote when Mr. Jeffries is back. We can postpone it, as long as we know what's available. I think part of the reason of getting Mr. Terry here was to know what's legal, and I think that the process I outlined is legal.
How do we legally discuss any of it if we see documents that we can't discuss?
Well, you could argue about that even if we don't see them.
No, it's a real question.
Yeah, so I think if I follow, because you were alluding to this point before, so the question is if you go with the model that Mr. Alonso suggested, and so the first meeting, the composite's presented, and then you have the opportunity to review other documents and to see whether you think that those together form the composite and the composite is accurate. If you were to go and look at those particular documents and you realize, you know what, there really is something that's missing, and it could be a positive thing, could be a negative thing, could be a neutral thing. If you come back in and say, you know, having had the benefit of having read the composite and thought about this over the last 2 weeks or whatever interval you have, and I'm not suggesting you're not acknowledging what you read, but I feel like there is something missing, right? So you're just expressing your opinion about how the composite could be improved to be more accurate without necessarily saying, because, well, I saw this in Selectman McQuaid's individual.
So how do we improve the composite without being able to use information? So if I say, well, the thing that was most shocking to me was that XYZ was in the individual of Selectman so-and-so, and it didn't make it to the summary, and I thought that was, the second I have any legitimate input.
Well, I think the answer...
So we come back to talk about the composite, but we cannot talk about it.
I think the answer, if I may ask that before he does, I think the answer is in the composite, in any discussion around the composite has to be done in generalities. You can't choose specifics. You can't say this sentence or this point. You have to say, I believe that in this section, it paints a more negative tone or a more positive tone than I think is reflected in others' reports. I mean, so you don't put out a negative. It's an overall feeling than a specific.
Yeah. The one thing that I would think could be a possibility, and I'm kind of reflecting on the example you used before, is that a composite, sometimes people think of it as almost like an average, right? They're trying to capture the everything in totality in one thought. You know, the general consensus on this was that the person did above average or below average or whatever it is. And I think when you deal with a composite, when you have conflicting views on a particular subject, it can be, you know, several board members express support for the handling of the budget, while others expressed some concern about this issue and that issue. And so there's a way to bring all the voices into it, and it's fair that the composite reflect the totality of that rather than just, well, the majority on a particular opinion went this way and therefore the rating on that is based on the majority view. And I think that's the piece that it sounds like wasn't reflected on your particular comment, where, you know, the introductory positive part was not included, but the part below was. You know, it'd be appropriate if you saw that in a composite, however you came to that discussion, but when you're talking in open session, to say, you know, I see that this part is something that I may have contributed to this process, but I feel like it may have missed the mark. Could it reflect a more balanced statement by doing this, right? And then there's discussion about how the composite could be modified to bring that into it. And that's kind of regardless of which process you use, but just a way to think about how a composite can bring thoughts together. And I can say, having done a few of these exercises, I know it's a challenge sometimes, but I think that's ultimately the composite should reflect the views of the board, even if the view of the board is split on a particular issue, right? And so...
The composite should show that.
What's that?
The composite should show that.
That's right. And the one thing I would just say, just on your idea of sort of having the composite only at first and then coming back to, which I think is what you did this past year. Yep. You can do it that way, or if you wanted to just have the composite a week in advance, as I said before, you just have to make the composite publicly available so that you folks are all reviewing it on the same terms as a member of the public, in which case you can review it before the meeting. but it isn't, a lot of boards have felt that that's not appropriate
Yeah, I don't think it
to share
matters.
the public sort of at the same time as you're discussing it with the town manager potentially for the first time.
Cool. So I think we'll revisit that final decision, but at least we know what's possible here and wait till we have the full board to make that decision. As far as the talking to department heads, I think the Attorney Terry has made it clear that we certainly have the possibility. I would caution, and I think again in the policy that I'd like to adopt in this, is that no department head is quoted verbatim and they're not named. So again, you're going to hear from all the department heads and you blend that into that one section, which is, I think, organizational leadership and personnel management. That's where it comes into play. That in order for us to judge on that category, which is an important category what the town manager does, I think that we can talk to everybody, but we're not citing anybody. We're not putting anybody under the bus, over the bus, or in the bus. They just, you talk to them and you just make a comment about what you heard and you blend it into your own voice. That's the whole trick about all of these.
You know, in the community that I talked to about this, what they did was they had one member of the board reach out to department chairs, board chairs, and one person reached out to a whole bunch of people, and they were able to either email their comments back or hand them to them, and this person kind of did a compilation of those comments and came up with a report, and everything was anonymous. No one was named.
Right.
So, I mean, it might be good to, as opposed to having everybody go talk to everybody, to come up with a process that we feel.
How did they get their comments to them?
They either emailed them.
Well, if you
or
emailed them,
they-
that's public record.
Well, or they
Unless
handed them to them.
Or you hand it to them.
I don't want it written down.
Right, yeah, see, I don't want to put department heads or employees in the position where anything that they say is on the record. And I want it to be candid, and, if for whatever reason, how somebody, and you choose any employee, right? How they speak to all of us is going to be slightly different depending on the relationship they have with you, how long they've known you, and that's just the world. I mean, I do a lot of employee evaluations, and I talk to fellow employees about, peers and everything like that. And so you get different, inevitably, the five of us are going to get different replies from the same people because of a lot of different reasons. And I don't think you should discourage that. And if you just have one generic thing that goes to everybody, you're probably going to get a whole bunch of positive things, and you're not going to be anything helpful.
Yeah, I think, ultimately the goal is to remember that the evaluation belongs to the board.
Right.
And you're looking for information to help you complete apparently one criteria from the form. But as I said before, I think one of the things I liked about the process you outlined was that somewhere in the middle, the individual board members would have an opportunity to talk with the town manager about it. And so if there's information that comes out through these conversations or input or however you obtain it, there's an opportunity to talk about it. And, I think that certainly the worst case scenario with these things is, there's one loud malcontent in some category that is very opinionated and lets everybody know about it, and that becomes, unfairly balanced input into the process. And so, I think, like I said, I think it's important, and it's important for the board's overall evaluation when it is providing feedback to the town manager. So you're working forward that, it be taken for what it's worth and considered along with others, and that there be communication with the town manager about issues so that you guys have the opportunity to understand whether there might be a reason why that voice is so loud. Understand that you are trying not to cite to specific people and things like that.
Yeah.
Now, all this time, we've been talking about town manager evaluation, and I have not turned to my right to ask the town manager her comments on any of this, so I will now do that, if you have any.
None at this time.
Your Honor, I reserve the right to call
For
witnesses.
tomorrow, when we're doing negotiations, she's going to tell me all the things I said. I just shot her in the foot. Yeah, and at the one point I did want to, of course, say also is that it does have to comply with whatever the terms of the town manager's employment agreement are. And we haven't really talked about that. I'm not sure that it inherently addresses this. It sounds like you've had some discussions about how you got to that form that's sitting on the table.
Well, it was just a review of what, I don't think the form itself, except for the lack of a numerical score, was really at issue. It was wordy, it was extra, it was agreed upon that we remove some verbiage from it because some of it was redundant and there was a lot of similar notes, but I don't think that was the issue. We added the numeric value, which I think adds a certain, a different data point, one that could arguably be more objective when you do the average, when you try to compile people's pros into something. It's a lot harder to do than if you just have numbers that you have to average, because that's just mathematical.
Yeah, I think I've been a part of some of the board's prior discussions about, do you want a number, do you not want a number?
I think you want both, and I think we got to that, so without revisiting that.
Okay.
So I think the 2 points, does anybody have any other questions about this? But we'll wait for that final point. I'll try to write up a policy that we can review, and then we can decide on the finer points of this when we have the full board.
Great.
I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Thanks for coming.
I am sticking around for executive session,
Yes,
correct?
wow, we wouldn't miss that. Our next meetings are, we don't have a meeting next week, it's the last Tuesday, so the Sewer Commission has the stage. We'll be meeting on September 3rd next. Any public comment from the public? Mr. Beardmore.
Evening.
Welcome.
Been a long time since
It has, I was going to mention that.
Peter Beardmore, 282 Pleasant Street in Lunenburg. On your June 18th meeting, there was a gentleman from Pratt Street who came up during public comment to discuss the situation at the bottom of Pleasant Street. There's a considerable amount of debris, gravel, stones that are washing into the road in the event of every heavy rainstorm from an adjacent property who has decided to make their landscape small stones without containing those stones. I have not heard a follow-up. Perhaps I've missed it, but I'm curious if there has been one and if the town is planning to take any action.
I can look into that.
Okay.
I have not heard of one, but I know this was pointed out to the DPW director.
And it was pointed out to this committee
Yep.
on the 18th of June.
Yep.
And
No, I remember
okay.
the
Yeah,
comment.
it's an ongoing issue. I know that the DPW has gone to clean it up. It was clean for several weeks when there was no rain. Yesterday we had a serious rainstorm, and it's not the worst it's ever been. But as a motorcyclist, it's incredibly dangerous, particularly in a busy section of road, which that section is. And unfortunately, as a citizen, I don't have standing until I'm injured. But the town does. You own the road, and there are bylaws to prevent this from occurring. And I would ask you to take whatever means necessary to compel that owner to take care of her property. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Passios.
Dave Passios, 56 Whiting Street. In your discussions earlier with, I know it was just an informational session in regards to the solar array over on Electric Avenue. But I'd like to refer back to the early days of these agreements in lieu of taxes. And I sat through a number of meetings with the present board then, and the attitude was that an agreement of this type was no good unless we had a net metering agreement to go along with it, that the town would not make out unless we had both. A few years later, another one came up, and the big push was, oh yeah, we need to do this agreement in lieu of taxes. And I asked the question of the regional assessor who was at that meeting as to why has the attitude suddenly changed that, oh, this is the best deal for the town. And if I get it correctly, I think he shared with us that at the time there was litigation in progress, that the industry had sued, claiming that some or all of the assets in these types of operations were not taxable. I've never heard what the result of that litigation was, but I think it behooves this board to know what that was. And the other thing is that I think we should be getting numbers as to what our potential is if we do not give them this type of an agreement, as to what our actual numbers are. To accept, about $10,000 doesn't ring my bell.
What are you referring to?
When I think it was Selectman Luck asked, well, what's the difference between the agreement in lieu of taxes versus if we don't give an agreement? And I believe I heard, $10,000 difference over 10 or 20 years.
Well, no, I think we asked what the total would be, and she said you would make less if you did it with not with the pilot. If you did traditional taxation methods, we would make less money, I think was what she said.
But we also asked to have that in a table so that we can see it.
Right, we're gonna ask the assessors for that. what
Right,
it would be.
and my point is that I strongly feel that information needs to come through our assessors, not through the applicants,
Well, that was
or comparison at least.
the woman was an assistant to our regional assessors. She wasn't Borrego, she was us.
Right. She was from our regional
The
assessing.
gentleman was from Borrego, but the woman who was here was somebody from our regional assessor's office.
Right.
And that's what we asked them for.
But like I said, I question I question what's changed that makes one better over the other than, and like I said, in the middle of the process, in the middle of those years, it was the threat of this lawsuit that hadn't been settled yet, that we may get virtually nothing going the tax route. You better get this agreement in lieu of taxes because you may end up with nothing. But then down the road, I never heard what the result of that litigation was.
We can get that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I had one other quick question, and I apologize for being late, so the number may have come out.
No problem.
Have we got a new growth certified number yet?
No.
And is there a reason why it's so incredibly late?
It's no later than normal. Usually it's not certified. Are you talking about free cash or new growth?
New growth.
Yeah, it's not usually certified until the fall.
Okay, I thought I heard a public comment from someone else that it is late, but, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Any public comment from the board?
Something I should have said at the beginning is Lunenburg will be back in school next Tuesday, August 27th. So the public schools reopen. Watch out for bus stops and buses and all that comes with it.
Thank you. Any other public comment from the board? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion that we go into executive session to pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21, Reason Number 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining, and the chair so declares that an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the governing governmental body. This would be negotiations for the police union.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, any discussion? All those in favor, it's a roll call. Mrs. Adams? Aye. Mr. McQuaid?
Aye.
Mrs. Luck?
Aye.
An aye from me. We will not be returning to open session. Thank you, everyone. We will see you at our next meeting on Tuesday, September 3rd. Good night.